Okay, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. We have a number of members joining us online today, so I want to remind you about the usual protocol with that, including muting your microphone when you're not speaking, using the raise your hand function if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, and refrain from using the chat function for debate amongst one another. Today's meeting will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will, as usual, be made available on the Council's YouTube channel following the meeting. For those attending the meeting in person, please be sure to activate your microphone when speaking so members online can hear you, and to ensure that the recording picks up what you have. Myself and the officers attending will monitor proceedings to ensure all requests to speak are seen. I have a number of officers joining the meeting this afternoon. To run through those, we have Louise Pringle, Director of Business Operations and Partnerships, Kirsty Stanners, Head of Finance, Jamie Reid, Head of Communities and Transformation, Barbara Clark, Chief Accountant, Michelle Blair, Chief Auditor, Debbie Hill, Chief Procurement Officer, Linda Hutchison, Senior Democratic Services Officer, and Grace Scanlon from the External Audit Team, who's just joined us, and Laura Pryor from the same. I think that's everyone. Okay, moving on, we have apologies for absence.
I have received no apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are required to declare any financial or non-financial interests on matters in today's agenda. Are there any such declarations to be made? No. Okay. Item 3, Chairman's Report, and there's a number of items in this, so please do bear with me. The first item is concerning the Accounts Commission Best Value Report, which has been recently published, and I'm sure all of you have read that. So this was a very positive report for the Council, published by the Accounts Commission, in which reference was included to the overview of the advantages and disadvantages of working from home and hybrid working, which was presented to this committee at our request last year. So it's good to see that they've picked up on that and noted the work of this committee specifically. The corporate management team, leader of the council, and Councillor Buchanan in his capacity as vice chair of the committee, met with members of the Accounts Commission earlier this week to discuss the report and matters arising from it. I'm grateful to Councillor Buchanan for attending in my absence, as I was engaged in another committee at the time, and I've subsequently had a personal briefing from the Chief Executive regarding this report and the discussion. The second item of my report is regarding a matter which was previously raised in the Chamber regarding the fraud response statement for 23-24, and namely issues around procurement. So at the meeting in January, we discussed clarification that had been provided on some fraud prevention related issues relating to procurement, specifically the conflict of interest related checks done to address the potential for links between council officers and the contractors used by the council. Feedback had already been provided to us at that time during the January meeting on the joint completion by procurement and the procuring service of a contract strategy document for every tender opportunity. Arising from further issues raised by Councillor Ireland at that meeting, the committee agreed that further clarification would be sought on whether or not the section of the document on conflict of interest, which for clarity requires officers involved in procurement to declare any conflict of interest and does not permit the officer to be involved in the procurement process where that would be the case, relied solely on self-reporting, and was this considered sufficiently robust. So the Chief Procurement Officer has confirmed that there will be no further action taken beyond an officer's self-declaration. This is because to do so could be considered a breach of that person's personal information. She has further clarified that when an officer engages in a procurement activity, they are taken through the contract strategy document by a procurement category manager. The importance of a fair and transparent process and the risk to the council if this is not adhered to is stressed to the officer concerned. Self-declaration is part of that process. Should an officer indicate they wish to declare a conflict, the details will be recorded on the register and the officer would be removed from that activity. The Chief Procurement Officer would also report the register entry to the officer's head of service. So I hope that provides sufficient clarity on the point that was raised previously in the committee. The next item is regarding my routine meetings with the external auditors, which has been scheduled for Thursday the 20th of March, which is in advance of the committee's next meeting in March, where we'll consider the external audit plan, so that's pretty good timing. And finally, the last matter in my report today is regarding Treasury Management Training. Committee members will note that we do look at these Treasury Management reports more routinely now, as indeed on the agenda again for today. And I've asked that some Treasury Management Training and that some Treasury Management Training would be provided not just to members of this committee but the wider council, on the basis that the reports we approve are remitted to full council for their approval. There will be further consultation with members on training, including dates, to ensure what is provided meets our needs. That concludes my report, so unless anyone wants to raise anything on those issues, I would simply ask that my report be noted. Am I happy with that?
Noted.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 4 on today's agenda is a point of clarification regarding the previous report we considered on tackling digital exclusion, and I'll invite the clerk to speak to this now. Wanda.
So this report simply confirms the clarification provided and that was already circulated to you all by email on queries raised at the committee's meeting in November on tackling digital inclusion, and that was arising from consideration of comments on a national external audit report on that issue, so it's simply for noting.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've all noted that, and moving on to the next item, which is the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26, and I'd like to invite Chief Accountant Barbara Clark to speak to this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the SIPFA Treasury Management Code of Practice, the Committee is responsible for ensuring effective scrutiny of the Treasury Management Strategy and recommending to Council its approval, including the prudential and Treasury indicators, the investment instruments for use as permitted investments, the list of investors and the policy on the repayment of loans fund advances. It's primarily because of these requirements that I present this to you today. This report is a similar format to that of previous years and sets out the Council's borrowing and investment strategies and the parameters that help to monitor both. And in summary, we're not planning to do anything different from last year. To allow the Council's borrowing to be controlled, we have set up prudential indicators which monitor the permissible borrowing and allows us to compare this against the actual gross debt. From the table on page 18, you can see that we plan not to fully fund capital spend by external borrowing whilst interest rates are high, but instead, when possible, use the Council's reserve balances as a temporary measure. This is considered both prudent and cost-effective as interest rates are forecast to fall during the year. The prudential indicators have been set using the Council's 25-26 proposed capital programme and has been compiled on the latest information available. Any movement in the programme spend will affect how well we keep within the prudential limits set. However, as stated in paragraph 4.2c, due to the introduction of a new accounting standard, the prudential indicators may require to be reviewed during the year once the implications of the new standard have been finalised, and this will be reported to this committee as part of the quarterly Treasury reporting, along with our projected outturn position at that time. Later on in the year, I will come back and provide a year-end report so that the final position can be reviewed against the approved indicators. With regards to the investment strategy, this is controlled by establishing what types of investment we can make, and these are stated in Annex C. And in Annex D, the associated risks are explained. Our primary objectives are always security and liquidity, and this is achieved by not only controlling what type of investment we make, but who we make it with. And in this regard, I've listed out in Annex E a list of counterparties for you to recommend for approval. This list also shows the investment limits to ensure that the Council has a diverse portfolio. The ratings of these bodies are monitored at least on a weekly basis, and if any institutions fall below our minimum rating level, we would remove them from our list to prevent any further investments from being made. Regarding the Council's policy on the repayment of loan debt, the proposals for which are set out in paragraph 3.4 of the report, we are proposing to move from an equal instalment of principals to an annuity method, which we have assessed as being a fair and prudent approach. This will help support a sustainable and deliverable longer-term revenue budget strategy, whilst ensuring that the provision remains prudent and appropriate to the benefits that we provided from the associated capital expenditure. It will also enable us to fall in line with councils across Scotland. Moving on to the rest of the report, it won't have escaped your notice that there is a lot of economic background information from our Treasury advisors, highlighted in the report in a lighter typeface. This is provided to give you some context of not only the UK but the global economic picture. Lastly, as in previous years, the final section of the report is on training. There's been no formal training from our Treasury advisors this year. However, I'm happy to arrange for this training in this area. I would ask you to let me know if you'd like, when you would like this to be organised, and I know several of you have already intimated that this would be something that you would like to do. I'm also happy to be contacted at any time should you wish a better understanding of any specific area within the report. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members present? I have Councillor Paul Edwin and Councillor Wallace online. Paul.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask it. Could I ask a question about borrowing limits, please? Yes. I'm not an accountant, so I'm fairly unclear about some aspects of this. It says in the report, I think on page 23 or thereabouts, that the council is currently under borrowed. Can I ask for indication, what is a reasonable level of borrowings? I see these numbers, but I don't understand how they're really worked out. It may be necessary for me and other elected members to get a tutorial on this subject in the future, but can you explain to me what is a reasonable level and what is not a reasonable level of borrowing, especially when we've got difficult decisions over funding to be made over certain items, and I just don't understand how it's worked out totally. I've read the papers, but I still don't see why it shouldn't be higher or lower. I mean, you could argue there should be no borrowing, so how do we base this decision? And is it a specialist decision that has to be made by officials, or is it something that the elected members should be involved in?
Thank you, Councillor. This is a delegated function for the Head of Finance, but to help you understand how we calculate that amount, we base it on a set percentage against our capital financing reserve, and we try to keep it around the 12% level. So this is in line with our recommendations from our Treasury advisors. So the calculations are all based on the fact that we will have an under borrowing of no more than 12%.
Supplementary. This is opposed to central government, which has much higher levels of borrowing then. So is this an arbitrary level?
This is a level that we've been recommended to hold as part of our Treasury practices through our Treasury advisors.
Can you clarify the basis of that? Who does actually recommend it? Why is that the case?
So our Treasury advisors are, they used to be called Link, I can't remember what they're called currently, but they come and see us quarterly, and they have the expertise in this area and guide us through certain areas of our Treasury management practices, and they recommend that this is a comfortable level for us to sit at.
If it's
I was just going to come in as well on top of that. The other thing is that CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting, have regulations that all councils in the UK have to adhere to. They are the regulator for local government finance. They have their Prudential Code and the Treasury Management Code, and we operate within those two codes of practice as per the regulator's advice. And Link takes that advice, and we pay for their expertise. They provide treasury management advice to almost all councils in Scotland, and they help us make sure that we're meeting all the requirements of those codes, but in the most prudent and cost-effective way for the council.
Thank you for answering that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to move on to Councillor Gordon Wallace now.
Thank you, Chair. You made mention a couple of times there about the annuity method and repayments, etc. Is that different from what we've done before? Is this a change in method? Yeah. And if so, in what way does it differ? Thank you.
So in recent years, for the past 3 years, we have used an equal instalment of principal, and we've done some modelling around an annuity method. And this is a method used by other local authorities. You'll appreciate that councils take advice or look at what other councils are doing as part of best value, as part of our Treasury recommendations from our advisors, as part of the Director of Finance group. And we became aware that we were out of sync with a lot of other authorities. So we did our own modelling on this area using net present value calculations, and we have come to the conclusion that in terms of which is the most appropriate write-off rate to use, annuity would be the best way forward.
Okay, anything further to add, Kirsty?
Yes, just to add to what Barbara said, absolutely, it's about the time value of money effectively. When you talk about equal instalment, effectively, if we took out a loan today and we were paying back £5,000 a month, we'd be doing that for the period of the loan, whether that be 50 years. But in actual fact, the value of money today is not the same as the value of money in 50 years. So I think if you think about, for example, £25,000 in 1983 probably could have bought you a very nice little house, but it certainly doesn't have that value today. So by taking that into consideration, the annuity method makes better use of the time value of money, whereby the profile of payments are a bit lower to start with, and then they increase towards the end of the repayment. But however, the value of the money means that when you look at it from the net present value perspective, it actually makes more financial sense for the council, and we get the better bang for our buck for our money to take the annuity method. And that's why every other council effectively already does that, and we actually did used to do that, and we changed previously, so now we're just changing back to be similar to all the other councils effectively.
Councillor Wallace, I see you've lowered your hand to you. Any further points on that, or you happy? Okay, thank you. Moving on now to Provost Montague.
Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me all right. I'm just looking at the document on screen, so I can't see the chamber, but it's page 32 in this item. Oh, I'm going off it myself now. And it's about monitoring knowledge and review of knowledge and skills. Sorry, so it's page 32. Is it okay to continue?
Yes, can see that there. Yep, it's member and officer training, that section.
Yeah, so it says, it's the paragraph, it says, as a minimum, authorities should carry out the following to monitor and review knowledge and skills. And it talks about record attendance at training and ensure action is taken where poor attendance is identified. So there's two questions that I want to ask on this. First of all, what action is it envisaged would be taken if there was poor attendance by, say, a member of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee?
I can, Provost, I can talk about the recording of the training. I mean, any training that members do and that we're aware of in member services, and we do a trawl to collect that data annually, we would record that on your training record. And I think, as members are aware, each member gets to see a copy of their draft training record, and it's eventually published, as we're required to do, on the council's internet. As regards poor attendance at training, I don't really have a comment to make on that, because What we do is we make training opportunities available to members. So in the case of the Treasury Management training that we're talking about, I'm proposing to consult with all members of the committee to ensure that it meets your needs. So we make training opportunities available. And if a member was to say any meeting or any discussion with the officer that they felt was a need for additional training on any issue, then we would consider the best way to provide it. That doesn't necessarily need to be a formal training programme. It might depend on how many members were interested in it, and if it was a niche thing, for example. But as for the poor attendance level, it's really for councillors themselves to determine whether they take up these opportunities.
Any further points on that from the chamber? I think Chris, do you want to come in, Kirsty?
The narrative says that.
If you just pause you a wee second there, Provost, before you move on to your next
Apologies,
question.
Provost. I was just going to add that the wording that's in the strategy here is taken from the SITFA Code of Practice. So they're always going to set out to try and meet the best possible standards, but the wording has been left relatively vague, obviously because that allows councils to take their own decisions. I think what we've had here is really good buy-in in the past, so it'd be fair to say there's not really been an example where we've had to put that into practice. But it would really be probably something like reporting back to the committee, but we will obviously be giving the opportunity for training in the coming months, and we can already see that there's a lot of interest in that, so I would hope that that would be something we'd have to be too concerned about.
Any further questions, Provost?
Yes, I can continue on this. Yes, I do appreciate that training opportunities are very much encouraged and it's recorded, but it was the words that ensure action is taken, where it doesn't seem as if there is any action that can or would be taken. If it was, say, a group, then maybe the group leader would be approached to say there's training, or maybe be brought to the attention of all the group leaders. But to me, it just the superfluous words that really are not backed up by, any action or any course of action you can see. But it does remind me of the difficulty, and it's just to flag this up again, that there is if members don't attend meetings of particular committees, and I believe it's part of training and learning when you do attend, for instance, audit or licensing, because you do learn with your attendance. The difficulty in the past has been if a member hasn't attended, there was nothing that the committee could do to remove that person from the committee, because it wasn't that attendance at individual committees was really relevant to their removal or possible removal. It was an overall attendance at committees. So I just want to flag that up maybe for a future action. If our standing orders have been amended in future, that's maybe something that we can look at. It's really to support the members in different committees, because that very often it's the same people that come and attend and make up the quorum, otherwise the committee couldn't run. So it really just was things that came to mind about difficulties that I believe that maybe the training as attendance at meetings should be included in that, because you do learn by attending meetings, not just training.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Provost, and obviously you'll be strongly familiar with the standing orders as indeed the person who enforces them at full council, so that is perhaps something that you'd be able to take forward. One question I would ask on that to the clerk of the committee is, I believe the training record, are they published anywhere?
Yeah, they're published annually on the internet. What we do is we collate a kind of a big set with everybody's training records on it, but what we publish is everybody's individual training record. Sometimes both forms of information are of interest. Sometimes, for example, external audit are interested in the global picture, so we list the training events and each member who attended them. And that can include things like briefing notes and things that are made accessible to members. So we take a fairly wide definition. We also include if a member attended training by virtue of their membership of an outside body. So if you were representative on the Valuation Joint Board, for example, if you did training, so we trawl for that kind of information as well. So they are published, but there is a requirement for us to publish them. But what we do is we publish a list of each individual's members, but we've got the list in a kind of more global format, if you like, listing them by event.
I think that's very helpful. Thank you, Linda. All I would say to that in wrapping up is it's elected members are here because the public choose them to be here, and the fact that this is made publicly available, one would think that perhaps the residents they represent would see what training the local representatives are taking part in, or perhaps not taking part in, and form a judgment on that. Okay, there are some other questions that I have on the Treasury Management Strategy. The first one, Barbara, is on page 14. So in the second table there relating to capital expenditure plans for housing, we can see in the last 3 years there's around £2 million a year categorised as CFCR. That's not an acronym I'm familiar with, so I'd appreciate if you could point out what that is and give it some context. Thank you.
Of course, that stands for capital from current revenue, and it's when capital expenditure is incurred and paid for out of the current revenue budget.
Okay, and is that something that we would usually do differently for housing? Because I note that in the immediate years coming, we don't have that. It's in the last 3 years.
That'll be within the full housing revenue account plan for the next 30 years, or the long stating plan that they've got set up, and that will help us fund the loan charges.
Okay, that makes sense. Staying with housing, moving on to page 15. So that first table there at the top of the page, we can see in the year 25-26 the borrowing for housing falls from 8.7 million to 122,000 before increasing again back up to 7 million, 9 million, 5.6. Can we give that figure some context, because we are obviously in a housing emergency at the moment, and it looks like we're scaling back in the year ahead the amount that we're borrowing to build housing.
Okay, so the capital plan for housing for 25-26 has been amended from what was previously in place, and we've brought forward some of the housing that we'd planned to introduce in 25-26. So all 105 units at Maidenhill will be now brought in 2024-25 in line with this emergency that we're facing. We've also using 6.5 million of a capital reserve that we received at the end of last financial year to help with existing stock spend.
Okay, that makes sense. And the final question for me in this, keeping on the housing theme, is on page 30. So section 6.4, looking at affordability, prudential indicators, the housing revenue account debt as a percentage of the revenue stream relating to that. It's obviously much higher than the non-housing revenue account items, which you'd expect to see given the nature of what the money's being borrowed for. It's a more secure asset. But that falls from 33.6% to 19%. I was just wondering what the reason for that big drop is, because I'm aware that the housing stock isn't going to be changing significantly going from one year to the next.
Sure. So at local government reorganisation, we inherited some loans fund debt that we have to pay off over the next, as it happens, 30 years. So that 30 years is now up, and that will be falling off, and therefore the loan charges will be less, and therefore the percentage is reduced.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So thank you for those answers. Just a quick wash up. Are there any further questions or points on this paper from anyone? We're happy to accept it. Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, it's the review of a national external audit report, Transformation in Councils, which is led by myself, and I'd like to invite the clerk to present the introduction to this. Thank you.
Yes. So this is a copy of the Audit Scotland report on transformation in councils, which was published in October last year, has already been circulated to all members of this committee, and it's Councillor Morrison who's leading the review of this particular report. The Director of Business Operations and Partnership has provided comments, and that those are attached to the report. Both she and Jamie Reid, the Head of Communities and Transformation, are attending meeting today if you've got any detailed questions that you'd like to them to answer.
Yeah, that's much appreciated, thank you. I do have one question. I don't know between yourself, Louise, Jamie, who's the best person to answer it. It's relating to putting a figure on the worth of transformation projects. So looking at page 55, for example, at 4.I, councils must transform to become financially sustainable, which I think is understood and accepted by all of us. But in terms of making a decision on a transformation project, which obviously incurs time, incurs money, what assessment is made of what the saving would be, what the efficiency savings would be worth in monetary terms? Is that something that we could quantify, or something that is quantified before making those decisions?
Thanks, Councillor Morrison. The amount of financial savings are just one of many potential benefits that a transformation programme can deliver. So within the prioritisation process that we look at as a council, we do have a kind of one council approach to this, where projects are brought into the programme and are assessed against their criticality. So that includes looking at things like whether there's the breadth of the service, whether there's a life in line component to the change, and also the potential productivity or financial benefits that may come out of a programme, or indeed the outcomes for communities that might be improved as a result. So there's a kind of multi-dimensional piece here that financial savings are simply one component of. And what we are always keen to do is make sure that any projects that are brought forward are aligned to our broader strategic vision in terms of a place to grow, and also fit within that project prioritisation piece and are likely to deliver benefits along the range of the spectrum that I've set out.
I appreciate that, thank you. Particularly around the non-financial aspects. So, for example, the population of East Renfrewshire is expected to grow by some, I think it's at least 10% in the coming medium term. So in a situation where there's lower staff numbers to do particular functions, but with a higher population to serve, would you agree that there's a financial element there in saying, well, if we didn't change, if we didn't transform how services are delivered, there would be an additional cost that we would have to incur to look after these additional residents, to look after additional streets and collect more waste, more recycling. If we can do that with the same number of people, surely there's still an identified saving there that could be quantified.
So I think one of the key challenges you're articulating there is actually how you demonstrate almost the social value of preventative work. So basically that is a known challenge, that if you do prevention or early intervention work, how do you demonstrate the cost saving for the demand that never occurred? Yeah. So that's an extremely complicated and challenging problem that the whole of the public sector wrestles with. We do have, I think you'll have seen in the feedback from the Audit Scotland report, we do have, I think, probably among the strongest kind of benefits views among councils in Scotland in terms of understanding what it is we're trying to achieve and how we can evidence that and how well strategically aligned it is. However, we haven't yet cracked the problem that anyone else has yet cracked about measuring something that hasn't happened. So that's part of the balancing piece that we have there, but it's something that we do look at.
I appreciate that. Louise, you want to supplement that?
Yeah, totally agree with what Jamie said there. I suppose I was just going to supplement by saying a lot of our transformation programme is about looking at things like technology and looking at how we can get maybe people to self-serve for themselves, so that we maybe don't need as many customer services people, but the ones that we do have are there for the people that are unable or struggling to self-serve or need that deeper help from us and that richer help. We think about automation of things, so some of our new services that we've put in the revenues and benefits system, for example, does quite a high degree of automation in terms of the processing of things, which helps us deal with that increased demand that you're talking about. And then to use the example you used about picking up bins, etc., there's technology in the cabs of lorries now, which is about route optimisation and trying to make sure that we're as efficient as we can be with our fleet management and the way that lorries even drive around the area, which again helps us to be efficient in how we use our staff. And those savings or those plans do all go into part of the budget process. It's just not that easy to show a straight line from a thing here to a budget saving over there. These are often multi-year changes that happen, but absolutely are considered as part of how we make up our finances and think about our staffing in departments year on year.
I appreciate that. The final point I'm making this before I open it out to the floor is the Audit Scotland, the Audit Commission report specifically says that transformation in councils is required to ensure financial sustainability. So I was just wondering really how decisions can be presented to elected members or to cabinet to make decisions around prioritising transformation projects which help ensure financial sustainability. I guess the point I'm getting at is how can you choose between them to ensure financial sustainability if we're not measuring the finances of them to any degree?
There's a bigger message, I suppose, in terms of this report and what the Accounts Commission have written in this report and where they're getting at than just an individual council can influence here. There is broader sectoral transformation that they are talking about the number of agencies that are out there, whether we should have 32 versions of every process and everything in terms of councils. Some of that is beyond our control. We are very much involved in national sectoral transformation work through the Improvement Service and Solace, through the Digital Office, through different things, and we would look at the business cases about for East Renfrewshire. Where does the involvement in those things lead us to? There are also individual reviews that will be done of different services, and some of those will come in front of elected members with choices about whether you want to do a service this way or that way, and that will be part of budget processes and part of reviews that we do routinely bring up as required. There is then a very operational piece, strategic and operational, that we do as part of our own project prioritisation. So regularly we are talking to services right across the council and as part of all the corporate services and having a think about, what's out there, what should we be getting involved in, what are other councils doing, what's the benchmarking telling us, where do we think we need to save money, where are customers asking for something different from us, where is there legislation that we need to find a way to implement, and that's all the stuff that's going into the mix of, we do actually have a model for project prioritisation. Something might get a lower score one year but actually come up the prioritisation matrix as the years go on because someone's gone out in front of us and proved that a thing works, and actually we want to do it too. So there's a lot of complexity in there, but I think what we need to bear in mind with this report is that some of these themes are broader than just East Renfrewshire Council, but have real value for us as well, and something we want to be ambitious about. And I think we are ambitious in terms of the work that we do with our data, the work that we've been doing around digital services. We've had a transformation programme for a number of years now, sort of 15 years at least, and can demonstrate real financial benefits from that, and good sound business cases for the things that we're doing. But it's quite a complex set of factors round about it.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Moving on now, I have a raised hand from Councillor Gordon Wallace. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak, if they please indicate. Okay, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you. Just when you look at the audit report, it mentions quite like step change. Reform is vital, radical change. Could maybe point me in the direction of where in this paper represents radical change for East Renfrewshire?
Again, Councillor Wallace, I'd go back to the step change, and the radical change isn't just for East Renfrewshire, it's a sectoral thing. I think every council will be better or worse at some aspects of transformation, I would say that some of the work that we're doing around our data and trying to get back into preventative spend, insight about customers, insight about, you know, our own workforce, etc., how we're dealing with certain processes, I would say we are ahead of other councils in that area. I'm not saying we're the best in Scotland, I've got no evidence for that, but certainly we're ahead in that. But I think in terms of that broad reform, that step change piece, I don't think anybody's quite cracked that yet. So I think that that's something that, you know, we are doing lots of different programmes that will move us along that journey. But I don't think we've got one particular example today that we would want to point at, saying that we are out there in front at that level at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Is that a legacy hand, Councillor Wallace, or do you have more?
No, if I can come back on that. Sorry, that question wasn't intended to try and catch anybody out, but really I think I think underline that what this report is really about is about radical change further up, about how councils and local services are actually being delivered nationally here. And I picked up on what Ms. Pringle was talking about in terms of do we need 32 replications of very similar posts, etc. And then we've been through this cycle before about regionalisation. Then we've moved back to 32 councils. So we've tried this before. We've come back, and again, the other question is to what extent can we have radical change, particularly when we've got things like working practices, which are very much at the core of our unions, if you like. So if there is to be radical, it has to be all embracing. And my concern here is, I mean, quite clearly, as an individual council, we are trying to do things. We've had these new.
Councillor Wallace, we lost your signal for a few seconds there. Unfortunately, it broke up. No, I'm afraid we're not getting anything there. We could perhaps come back to you if you can sort that signal issue out, because we're not hearing anything legibly.
In the paper from Ms. Pringle here.
He's not heard us, has it?
Okay.
Councillor Wallace, we missed the last part of your comments there because there was a problem with the sound. I don't know whether it was at your end or our end, but if you could maybe repeat that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're quite faint, I would say.
Yeah, we missed the last few sentences you said, Councillor Wallace, because your signal was breaking up. So do you want to reiterate the kind of the top line question that you have?
It wasn't a top line question. It was just a final observation that this, I think, is a paper that is more higher up than what we as local councillors can actually respond to. That's all.
I think that's a very valid observation. I'm going to bring in Councillor Buchanan and then Councillor Edlin.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, raised in it. It goes back to the work done some years ago in terms of the Christie Commission and the reform of public sector, the whole idea of shared services and how that comes about. And in actual fact, ironically, there was a meeting just on Monday of this week where there was a conference in Glasgow at Strathclyde University, which was attended by local government. It was attended by all of our third sector partners, because one of the big issues just now, and it touches on our vision for the future, a place to grow, it touches on service delivery, it touches on digitalisation. All of those aspects all play a part in the everyday services that we deliver for our residents and our constituents. Digitalisation may help and automation may help in some areas. It doesn't mean to say that we do away with the staff in those areas, but it does potentially free up staff to be utilised in other areas which are much more staff intensive. So the idea of the reform agenda is to look at all of those aspects and bring it together. Some of those outcomes, as has been long argued, aren't necessarily going to be seen, if you like, in a political term. Many of the outcomes that we want to see are generational and may not be measurable in that short-term aspect. Where they can be measured, they can be factored in. But the prevention agenda is much more about looking further down the line and saying, well, in 20 years' time, what difference did that make? Did that make big changes to our social justice system? Did it make changes to our healthcare systems and how it was factored in? So it is still very much a live issue, as much as Christie perhaps in many folks' view didn't move as quickly as it could. It is still there on the agenda, it is still being addressed, and as I say, as recently as Monday there was a conference to actually bring government, national government, local government and all of our third sector partners and organisations together to see how much further we can go, because it is still about breaking down some of those silos that still exist and how better that service delivery can be made and how better working can try and change that reform agenda. So it is still, I think, very much on the cards. But it is not just, as you say, Councillor Wallace, just East Renfrewshire. We do a lot, but we feed into a much big picture which has to happen with a national reform agenda, and that's where it ties in to Christie, where it ties into the European Charter of Self-Governance, etc., and ensuring that we can manage all of those things and get the outcomes, I think, that we all want to see and that our residents would no doubt want to see.
Thank you for that contribution. I think that point's actually noted in paragraph 17 of the underlying Audit Scotland report that we're examining today, where it is noted that only by working more collaboratively with other councils and indeed with local partners that this level of transformation can take place, so that the services we provide remain sustainable, particularly in East Renfrewshire with the level of population growth we have and the level of population growth in particular demographics which places greater demand in particular services such as education and health and social care. Councillor Edlin had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Page 57, paragraph 9, second last sentence. The words are, the Council has committed additional financial resources to augment improvement service capacity to pursue this work. Can you tell us what the numbers of this additional monies and what it was before and the percentage increase, that kind of detail, please?
Not sure which between you is best to pick that up, Louise.
Yeah, I don't have the exact figure. It's in the region of I think it's about £7,000 for us, and it's only it's not a recurring thing. I think it's maybe just for the next couple of years that we've committed, and it's for the Improvement Service and Solace are leading a number of different work streams around reform and around transformation generally. There's a big theme about public sector reform, and then there are individual pieces around. There's one looking at statutory services and trying to understand the basis of statutory services and what sits behind that and what the limits of statutory services are, which will then take you into what the opportunities might be across government for that. There is one looking at procurement. There's one looking at community involvement and what that might look like for the communities. So Solace decided just, I think in December, to augment a little bit of additional resource into the improvement service to get some of these work streams moving a little bit faster than they are. So they prorated that across councils. So I think for us it was something in the region of about £7,000, I think was. Is that right, Kirsty?
Yeah, it's £7,000 a year for 2 years, so £14,000 in total across the current financial year and next financial year.
Can you explain how that number is arrived at? Is it just an arbitrary figure, or is it calculated on the basis of previous payments, or what?
It was calculated in terms of, I think it was prorated across each of the individual councils based on size, I think, and it was related to bringing in some additional project and scoping resource into the improvement service. So they started with a big number and then prorated it across the council, so that's a kind of equal share of it.
Thank you.
Size.
Okay. One further final question for myself is on paragraph 12 of the report that both of you have provided in response to this paper. So paragraph 12 notes that in the summer of this year the Council's digital transformation strategy will be refreshed, and part of that refresh will include consideration of any appropriate use of artificial intelligence, process automation and similar technologies to help improve efficiency and better service for residents. What's the kind of reporting stream of that? Will that come to council generally, or will it come to this committee? Because I'd be quite interested, I think others would be quite interested to hear what the conclusions of that are.
So that strategy will go to Cabinet.
Okay, that's grand. So we'll keep a close eye on that when it does so. Are there any final questions or comments? Are we happy to accept this item? Yeah, I have acknowledgement in that all round. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for fielding all of those pretty extensive questions. It's appreciated. That takes us on to the last item on the agenda today, which is an update on the internal audit plan for 24-25, the implementation progress for Q3 of that year, and I'd like to invite Michelle Blair to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's been 4 reports relating to Plan 24-25 audit work issued in the quarter. Details are included as usual in Appendix 3, page 67. One of these reports was a follow-up report of environment audits, and this has already been circulated in full to members. There was no issues raised of major concern or that would appear in the annual report in any of these reports. The only thing I would bring to your attention is one recommendation rated high within the Bonneton House audit. And it's only rated high because we want action quickly, not because it's of high monetary value. And it's around the corporate appointeeship bank account, and a comprehensive analysis of monies lodged and withdrawn from this account was not available at the time of the audit, and it needs to be brought up to date as a priority. Management in the response agreed to action it by the end of January 25, but we've not obviously gone back to check that they've done that yet. There was 2 items noted on page 61, covering report, of items that we've covered under general contingency, and work in both of these is now concluded, and there was neither resulted in a report being written or any loss to the council. Appendix 4, page 71, shows progress against indicators, where we're currently meeting all targets apart from one, which is the time taken to issue reports, which is slightly over. Generally, we're making good progress against the plan, and since I wrote this update, we've issued 2 more reports, and there's 4 further files ready for review, so that the next progress report should have quite a lot of reports in it. Paragraph 4 in the covering report, you'll note that I'm asking approval to delete overtime from the audit plan. The reason for this is that some audit testing of overtime was included in the application audit of payroll, which was actually a 23-24 audit, but it wasn't actually issued until July 24. And it's considered too soon to look at it again, particularly as over the next few weeks we'll be doing follow-up to check that the application audit payroll recommendations have been implemented. And as part of the follow-up, we'll do some small samples of overtime within that. What else? That's really everything. Subject to any questions, I would ask you to note the progress report and approve deletion of the overtime report from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I think that gives some useful context as to why the overtime audit has been deleted. I certainly remember the last test being discussed at committee, and we did spend quite a bit of time going over that. So it's good to know that the follow-up will still take place. Are there any questions? I see that Councillor Gordon Wallace has his hand raised. Any other questions on this? No. Okay, Gordon.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask, I see City Deal is listed here. What aspects of City Deal are being made? Thanks.
Thanks. City Deal, it's not particularly an audit that we would choose to do every year, but we're expected to do some sort of coverage by Glasgow City, who are the kind of lead authority. And generally what we do in the City Deal audit, which is always done kind of late on in the year, is look at the latest 4 claims, quarterly claims that have been submitted, and just really check, do they look reasonable, are they accurate? We have a quick look and see if projects are overspent or running late. It's quite a short audit actually.
Okay, Gordon.
Yeah, just a concern when you do say it is a short audit, just given the concerns we have over, for example, Orrs Road and the difficulties that we're having there, I would suggest that we maybe want to drill down a little bit into that to see exactly where we are and what projections were and what the actual expenditure is going to be. And clearly, if there are any lessons to be learned from it. Thanks. So, in short, are these kind of aspects that you would look at when carrying out an audit of, for example, City Deal, or is it purely kind of superficial that we've ticked the right boxes? Thanks.
I don't actually know if we do it every single time, but we do drill down, and sometimes when we look at City Deal, the City Deal audit's actually been, the audit work's primarily completed for 24-25, but I haven't actually reviewed the file yet. I can certainly come back to you once I've reviewed the file.
Yep, thank you. Through you, Chair, if I could just perhaps ask that Ors Road is maybe something you want to have penciled in. Thank you.
Well, certainly as a ward member for where Ors Road is taking place, I would certainly like a copy of that report to be circulated. There's a lot of City Deal projects going on, and it will affect a number of people in different wards, so perhaps that could be circulated to all members of the committee. Are there any other questions or comments at all on this? No? Okay, on that basis, I'd be happy to accept the two recommendations that we note in the report and accept the deletion of the overtime audit from the plan. Yes, agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's business. Thank you for your attendance.